Good morning, everybody. I think that we gradually start. People might be joining us one by one. So welcome everybody to this session on the UNFCCC Capacity Building webinar. I'll share my screen so you'll see what will be the program of today. So the webinar is part of the series of webinars organized by Pan-African Farmers Organization, Andreas Hermes Academy, and Food and Forest Development Finland, FFD. I'm working for FFD, and I'm glad to invite you. Welcome to this session. Today, we continue on the National Determined Contributions, so-called NDCs. Please note that the presentation part will be recorded. There will be a question and answer session later on that will not be recorded. There is also an interpretation available. You can find the interpretation going to the lower bar of your Zoom screen, and there you should see a globe. And then you have an interpretation between French and English. So we have already gone through in the previous sessions what is the NDC and how they measure how the government is contributing to the climate agenda. Today, we want to go more on what it means for the farmers' organizations, and we'll have two case studies, one from Malawi, and we have Mr. Derrick Kapolo, head of Agribusiness from the Farmers Union of Malawi, going through the exercise in his respective country. And then we have William Madudike, who is a chair of youth board from Zimbabwe's Farmers Union, and he will go through how did they manage to influence the process in Zimbabwe. Finally, we have Maïdie Sinitambirivoutin. I hope I said the name more or less correctly. She is a climate change specialist from FAO, and she'll go through some of the FAO tools that FAO is providing and how they could help you to kind of present what is the weight of farmers and farmers union representing them to the process, which hopefully would open your doors to become a recognized actor in this process. I would now like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Derrick Kapolo from Malawi, to go through a presentation on how the NDC process is progressing in Malawi and how the Farmers Union is influencing that. So, Mr. Kapolo, the floor is yours.
Good morning once again. I'll be sharing my screen shortly. I would like to indicate that what we are going to present is how the process is like currently in Malawi, and through this workshop, I'm sure that we'll be able to see how other countries are faring and also be able to draw lessons from the same. So can you kindly confirm if you are able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. I have titled my presentation to be ignored or trapped in bureaucracy, farmers concerned in the NDC processes in Malawi. So I think this is just a brief outline of the presentation. I will talk about country connected between agriculture and the climate change in Malawi, the measures that are there, and the commitment that I see, and how, as farmers in Malawi, we are participating in such processes. Just a brief introduction for the country. We are bordered by Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zambia. It's a tiny country in the southern part of Africa. We are what the whole part of Africa. We have a beautiful lake, some beautiful sceneries, and the Planche Mountain, rich culture, and at the same time, we have very hardworking people, more especially women. Now connecting to agri sector, our economy is mostly driven by agriculture, contributing to about 30% of the GDP, and about 70% of the population relies on agri sector. And the agri sector is dominated by smaller farmers that constitute about 70%. The agri sector again is also more dependent on the rain-fed agriculture, and the 4% is under irrigation. This puts the country at the mess of the climate change and climate variability in such a way that when we have any slight change in the climate pattern, livelihoods get affected. In particular, wanted to share with the participants that as a country, we have experienced increase in intensity and magnitude of extreme weather events. From 2018, for example, we have had four big cycles. Cyclone Gombe, Cyclone Anna, Cyclone Idai, and just recently we had Cyclone Friday, which has cumulatively, this cycle that were impacted about 2 million farmers in the country. This comes in the form of disrupted livelihood, washing away of crops, and even the animals. And I think the pictures that tell 1,000 weight. I think I've shared some of the pictures that we have had. You can see women trying to scavenge some crops from their washed away fields. And just this year, we were among countries that have been impacted by the drought that has come due to El Nino. Currently, already we are estimating about 1.6 million farmers being impacted. This is according to the simulation by African Risk Capacity. The state president has declared 23 out of 28 districts as state of disaster because in February, I think when the crops were at a very critical stage, the country experienced the droughts. Already we are getting some financial support from the World Bank. Currently, the state president in Kenya, we are deciding about $50 million support towards lessening the impact of the drought. So you can see how fragile our agriculture is to climate variability, and that also cascades to the overall economic well-being of Malawi. Our commitments now on greenhouse, but before the commitments, but how do we fare in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions? Our emissions are estimated at 33 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. We are not a big contributor to the global greenhouse gas emissions, but we are among the most impacted. So that's just a breakdown of how we are contributing to the global greenhouse gases. But agriculture is tops the contributors, with livestock among the most contributors of the greenhouse gases in the country. Again, if we compare to the region, the capital GDP emissions, we, as I was indicated, we are not a heavy contributor to, if you have to compare with other countries. For example, at per capita, we are just contributing about 0.45 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. If you look at on the GDP side of it, it's just 0.87 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per 1,000 US dollars. But nevertheless, as a country, we have made some commitments to make sure that we are enhancing our carbon sinks, and we are reducing our carbon footprint. In 2016, for example, we adopted the National Climate Change Management Policy. This policy provides strategic direction for the country on how can we intervene on the issues of climate change in order to, as I indicated, to reduce our carbon footprint. And in 2001, we developed and submitted updated NDC to the UNFCCC. This was built on the National Climate Change Management Policy. And again, it followed the submission of intended national contributions in October 2015. So these documents are speaking each other. As I said, they're building on each other. The issue is how, as a country, can we choose our carbon footprint, looking at how the issues of climate change impact the economy. So the question would be, what is it that is in our NDC? I think I'll just go just peruse through so that the audience can appreciate. We have mitigation measures, and specifically for agriculture, those are the measures that we have committed as a country. As regards to mitigation is concerned, all the measures categorized as condition and conditional. But if you can see, I think there is a lot of work that is supposed to be done in the agri sector. Again, when it comes to adaptation measures, impact and adaptation measures, we have a lot of work again in agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. And as I say, I will just peruse through for the audience to appreciate. But we have I have about 3 slides that are capturing various interventions that are sector. I have to mention here that this is connecting to what I presented earlier. I want to say that agriculture is more or less like a backbone of the economy. So a lot of work happens in that sector. And that's why in our NDC, more weight is also being captured. The agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. And now, having presented that, I would like to take the audience to this coordination structure for the NDC processes in Malawi. The structure it has started from the Malawi Climate Change Management Policy. The Malawi Climate Change Management Policy had this structure, and moving from the Malawi Climate Change Management Policy, getting to the NDC, the structure hasn't changed that much. So the process mainly is coordinated by the government, especially the Department of Environmental Affairs, and we have the National Steering Committee on climate change, and then this is the one that is providing overall coordination, and then we have the National Technical Committee. And under the National Technical Committee, we have working groups, environmental working groups, another one focusing on mitigation, another one focusing on adaptation. And then the whole government structure was in place, where we have the cabinet committee, we have parliamentary committee, and then we have the secretariat. But as I indicated, the structure is very dominated by the government institutions. And when we were developing the NDC, it was our lobby that at least the structure should at least include non-state actors. And then we have we connected the climate change issues to our long-term development blueprint called Malawi 3. We have a long-term development blueprint that points to up to 2063, which is coordinated by the National Planning Commission of Malawi. So again, we also have a component that connects and coordinates the issues of climate change. You can see the National Steering Committee is at the center stage here. And within the National Steering Committee, we have the National Coordinator that acts as the second point. And then we have the first focal person under the National Planning Commission. They should just look at the country level to see that all the interventions that are happening are being mindful of the commitments that we have made in our NDC. And look at it, we have all the government institutions hovering around the National Steering Committee and the taking committee, and already with limited participation of the non-state actors, let alone the farm organizations. And now getting into our national steering contribution itself, we identified focal points that are informing gap analysis. And looking at all the focal points of the Ministry of Agriculture, of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy, it's all garbage. And this has been really a thorn in the flesh as farmers to say, how can we really penetrate through this structure? So analyzing the current structure, what we noted is that it's dominated by the government, ministry, department, and agencies, and it's not inclusive enough. And again, farmers have been left out in the structure. And what is happening is that farmers are just being regarded as merely the recipients of the decisions that are being made. And even in the mitigation analysis that are shared, you find that farmers are not even appearing. And when we have been engaging with the ministry, in fact, especially the focal points, we just know that just 2 weeks ago, in fact, the focal points we are meeting just to do a quarterly report, like bring together information around who is doing what kind of investments are being done in order towards the NDC itself, and what intervention are being done. But as farm organizations, we just had that we were not really invited in that kind of a discussion. Yes, yet we are doing a lot of work around the mitigation adaptation. So considering this, as I indicated, we have been making a lot of efforts to get ourselves incorporated in the processes. Somebody said that if you are not invited, you have to invite yourself to the discussion. So we have been trying our best to get ourselves invited to the coordination structure, so that as farmers we should be part and parcel of this process. Just to mention, we had an in-country workshop that was organized, that was supported by SACAO. We did a report that clearly highlighted that farm organizations are not participating in the processes, and we invited the national focal person to that workshop. And from there, we took it from there to express our interest to participate in these processes at the national level. So I'm just sharing here, I've just hidden the names, but we started with an email reaching out to the national focal person, indicating our expression of interest that we want to really be part of these meetings. And this was done on 29 July last year. And then the national focal person guided us to say, okay, I might be the national focal person, but I cannot make the ultimate decision. So what you can do, can you please write to the director of government affairs and the chief of government affairs officer. So we started seeing the bureaucracy there, because what you have noted that the focal person, yes, is the one who's supposed to be the coordinating person at the national level. But because it's falling under the ministry and under the department, he's bound by the bureaucracy that happens in the government system. So he cannot make the ultimate decision. So we were told to write the director and the chief, and we really did that on 7th July 2023. We wrote to the chief and we copied the director, expressing our interest still, but we never got any response. We tried to follow up with phone calls, but we never really got any response to say whether we are denied or accepted to participate in such a structure. So we are now at a crossroad to say, are we on pending, or have we been rejected? But as I've indicated is that as to date, almost to be clocking a year, we haven't been invited in such a discussion. For Malawi, as I indicated, it's a very close coordination structure that prioritizes the government institutions, and then the rest are just the decisions that be made at that level. When I was just trying to follow up with a colleague who happened to sit in that, because the Minister of Agriculture, the whole ministry only has one person who sits in that structure as a focal person under the Minister of Agriculture. So when I was trying to reach out to the Minister of Agriculture, that focal person indicated, so no, we just had a like, and we only had the government, MTS, parastatals, departments, and ministries. We didn't have anyone from the civil society. Yet in Malawi, the civil society space is very big, and let alone even the farm organization is also big. The country we have two farm organizations, Farmers Union of Malawi and NASFAM. If you can have one seat, you can see who will be sitting in such a national structure, but that hasn't been accorded. And as I say, we are still wondering to say, have we been rejected or we are on a pending? So I think from what we have noted is that we have some reasons and we are trying to propose some recommendations. As I said, the structures are dominated by government, and we really do not know whether we are regarded as a threat and whether we are regarded as not very important to the process. But we feel like as the farmers in Malawi, we really deserve to have a seat in that connection structure. So again, we are still wondering to say, is this a rejection or are we just trapped in bureaucracy? But I think in our analysis, we feel like mainly it's just the bureaucracy because the one who is supposed to make the decision is the director, and the director is at a high level. We really wish the focal person, the national coordinator, would be able to make that decision, but I think he is bound by the hierarchy that is in the government system. Again, what we are trying to pose now, I think we have to have a collective lobbying for incorporation of farmer voice in the business processes, because what we have noted is that other countries, I think they're able to participate, others are not. But I think the general picture that farmers have been left out. I think another compounding thing is that it's because it's being coordinated by the Department of Government Affairs. Had it been that it was coordinated by the Minister of Agriculture, what is the Minister of Agriculture has had more influence, a farm organization would have been able to participate because Minister of Agriculture is closer to the farmers than the Department of Government Affairs. So we feel like maybe if we can have a collective connection, and that is, I think it would be easier for the NDCs process to start incorporating the farmers. Another thing is, as we are lobbying, I think we are trying to explore to lobby to the UNFCCC to make it mandatory that member states should include NFOs in the NDC structure. I can give an example of when we are doing the food systems, the national dialogue. It was somehow mandatory it came from the food system that the national dialogues are being conducted. Farmers have to be part and parcel of that process. And because of that, as Farmers Union of Malawi, we are part, in fact, we are one of the lead partners that connected the national dialogues, and we are part and parcel of the report that was developed for the country. But what I'm saying is that I think the UNFCCC has a big relaxed on that side. With all of that, I think the member states are doing things at will. And what is coming is that other stakeholders and farmers are being left out in that process. The farmers are very important in this process. That's my presentation. Just about Farmers Union of Malawi. I think this is just a union of farmers in Malawi. We focus on post-side focus, agribusiness and market linkages, and we also do institutional capacity development. Thank you very much. I hand over to you, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Derrick. That was very revealing, even though a little bit depressing. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience. I think we could take one or two here. There will be a wider questions and answer sessions after all the presentations. I don't see anybody asking, but I hope that you can stay on board, Derrick, to the end. So if people are then willing to ask more questions. Thank you very much. I would then ask William Madudike from Zimbabwe to present the case from his respective farmer union.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Let me share my presentation. Okay. All right. Can you see my presentation from there?
Yes,
Please confirm if
we can
all
see
right,
it well.
that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So, as it's been said, my name is William Madudike, and I am the youth chairperson for the Zimbabwe Farmers Union. Yeah, I work with currently 5,000 young farmers that are members of the Zimbabwe Farmers Union. And so today I'm just going to give you the context of what we have done and what we are currently doing towards our contributions in the NDCs at the national level. So to just give you some context as well, Zimbabwe is a very small country in the south of Africa, bordering, I think, 5 countries, as you can see, with Mozambique to the east, South Africa at the bottom, in the south, Botswana, as well as Zambia. We are very close to Malawi as well. And we are a member of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Union. So just to give the context of what agriculture means to Zimbabwe, the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector in Zimbabwe contributes about 7.2% of the GDP, according to the World Bank. And over 70% of the population is dependent on agriculture, as farmers, as employees, business people. So it's a huge sector, though it has now have a little contribution towards the GDP. However, the aggregate contribution in terms of value is now bigger than it was before. And in terms of our interaction with the UNFCCC processes, the focal ministry is actually the Ministry of Environment. In the beginning, when the Paris Agreement was reached, it was actually the climate change was actually under the Ministry of Agriculture. However, now it has now been separated, and we are now just a stakeholder in the processes through the department, which is called the Climate Change Management Department. So that's where the focal person is within the Ministry of Environment, who reports to the UNFCCC. Zimbabwe Farmers Union itself is the biggest farmer organization in Zimbabwe. It has been in existence since 83 years ago in pre-colonial times, and it has over 300,000 members now. But it was more than that. Then it also falls from a policy standpoint. We interact with the Ministry of Agriculture directly because that's our history.
William,
Then,
can
to
I
just
interrupt?
give you also the perspective of the agri, forest, and land use contributions towards.
William, your line is breaking. Could you switch your
When we
camera
are-
off?
Okay, that's fine. Let me escape.
And then you could take the 2 last sentences and repeat them.
It is asking me to start by. Okay, that's fine. Let me switch.
That looks
Okay.
good.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes, it's
Looks
better.
Okay, that's fine. All right, that's fine. I'll go back to my presentation. According to the NDCs that were submitted in 2021, we realized that 3 out of 4 adaptation mechanisms that were suggested in there have a direct bearing on farmers. And when we look at all the mitigation strategies for agriculture, forestry, and land use sector, as well as the energy sector, which contributes 33% of the emissions, all of them have a direct bearing on agriculture. Because if also we look at the energy sector in Zimbabwe, we realize that there are 33% of emissions. 13.8 of those emissions are actually also in the agricultural sector through the use by farmers, as well as energy from coal, which we use for tobacco curing. And just looking at Africa, we also realize that almost 80% of all African NDCs identified agriculture as a priority sector. Despite this importance in the economy and in the NDCs, national farmer organizations in Zimbabwe have not been invited in the UNFCCC and NDC consultation processes. Despite the inroads that have been made even at UNFCCC level in terms of including agriculture. Now, this is what we have achieved as Zimbabwe in terms of NDCs and what we have done from an NDC perspective. We have submitted our NDC in the 2015, our first one, and the third national communication was in 2016. It's not an NDC, but a communication that they sent to the UNFCCC. And then we submitted our implementation framework and our monitoring, reporting, and verification report in 2019. Then our low emission development strategy in 2020. And we have also submitted our biannual report, biannual update report in 2021, as well as the revised version, the first revised version of the NDCs. So now in 2025, we are going to be submitting the new NDC, and that's the part where we are working on as Zimbabwe Farmers Union. So I'll give you how we have interacted with the ministry, with the department responsible for the NDCs, what we have managed to achieve, and what we are still to achieve. So in 2019, when we were not involved in the NDC processes, but in the NDC planning processes, but we were involved in the NDC implementation processes. In that, we came up with nationwide climate smart agriculture and adaptation projects, which were in support of the policy that emanated from the NDCs. Then we realized the need to amplify the voice of farmers at policy level, because as we were interacting, we were getting feedback of what is going on in terms of the current the NDCs at that time. Then in 2020, when we realized the need to amplify voices, we did a research within the Zimbabwe Farmers Union to analyze NDC processes, gaps, and opportunities for us to actually, come in. And when we made that research, we came up with recommendations that we submitted to the NDC, stakeholder meetings, but we were not directly in the stakeholder meetings, but we submitted to the Ministry of Environment. We looked at the 2021 NDCs, which were submitted after our recommendations. Just a few recommendations were considered. Perhaps they were also carried by other stakeholders that are on the official table or on the coordination platform of the NDCs, but we just saw that some of our recommendations were actually carried in there, but there were very few. And we cannot really point to say this was a ZFU contribution. It could have been coming from the Ministry of Agriculture or other stakeholders. And then 2022, 2023, when we saw that we are not on the table, we then did, in collaboration with SACAO, had a research assessing engagement mechanism at national level. And then we realized how big and fast the process is, and we analyzed how we can fit in. And then we also were looking at the kind of stakeholders that are currently involved in the processes. There is no national farmer organization that has been invited, like I said, but there are actually non-governmental organizations there. There are civic society organizations like your Africa Youth in Climate Change. That is one of the civic organizations, local civic organizations that is involved. But there were organizations like your embassies, US Embassy, French Embassy, UK Embassy, UK Aid, US Aid, even the Dutch Church Aid, a Christian care organization, faith-based organizations, they are on the table. But for some reason, the national farmer organizations who carry the highest number of people in our society, who carry the biggest brand of climate change, they are not included there. And when we realized that, we also made some interfaces with the focal person, and that they then shared with us that one of the important things is that national farmer organizations need to come up together, because there are many in Zimbabwe, over 5 farmer organizations. They need to come up together, and then they have one focal person who is then going to be included in the NDC processes. So currently, as we speak, we are engaging other farmer organizations, and that is challenges of its own, because different farmer organizations actually represent different categories of farmers, but then we'll come up with one focal person who will be included in the stakeholder processes. So that's a win on our side. And in 2023, we continued to engage through our parent ministry, which is the Ministry of Agriculture, because we have meetings around adaptation, national adaptation plans. There's also the Coronivia joint work on agriculture framework, where we actually participate as well. So most of the recommendations and our suggestions from there, some of them are carried into the NDC processes, and then again a decision is made as to which ones are better carried to the actual final NDCs. I'll speak this year. We actually were part of the validation process for the agroecology policy, which is under the Ministry of Agriculture, but it is one of the areas that has been mentioned by our previous NDCs as one of our adaptation and mitigation mechanisms. So we contributed to that, and I was actually part of that particular process as Zimbabwe Farmers Union and other unions to contribute towards the agricultural policy, and it has recently been adopted with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we know that it is going to be carried into the adaptation mechanisms that are going to be in our NDCs, but we are not yet right at the table. So our feeling as Zimbabwe Farmers Union is that we not only need to be involved on the table, but we have to be involved in the kitchen where we decide the menu. Because most of the time when we are not involved in the kitchen, we find that we are actually now part of the menu ourselves, because all the things are forced on us as farmers, and we have to deal with the brand of it. And there are no feedback loops that we can use to say this is working and this is not working. Even when we use it, like Derrick said, the bureaucracy actually, presents bottlenecks such that most of our recommendations don't end up being included or represented as we want them to be as farmers organizations. So in terms of integration, this is just a schematic diagram to show you that our entry point is at the Mitigation Committee and Adaptation Committee, which is part of a stakeholder coordination platform. So from the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture has its own stakeholder, but the stakeholder also does consultative meetings with us, and that's where we enter into the process as of now. And then key entry points in general when we're assessing our journey in terms of what are the entry points for us and what could be the entry points for other farmer organizations that are in the audience today. The first one, at the NDC development and revision stage, there is room for us. And like I said, we've now been invited, but it's only one stakeholder who is representing all the farmer organization. So it means we have to form some sort of a consortium in which we gather and we discuss these climate issues. And then what comes out of it is carried by our stakeholder into the consultative process officially. And then we have the national adaptation plans. So the national adaptation plans are more open for us to contribute in, because also the Ministry of Agriculture is very critical in the national adaptation plans. So we directly contribute towards that. We have realized that most of the national adaptation plans, the contents of the national adaptation plans or the national adaptation policy are actually carried into the adaptation mechanisms of the NDCs. So it is another entry point. And then there is stakeholder and CSO platform or forums. So there are other, civic society organizations that we interact with, and non-governmental organizations, development agencies like your European Union projects. For example, I can point to the Trans DVC, which was under the European Union. So you find that the stakeholders that we interact with that fund some of our projects that we work on other projects that we implementing climate smart agriculture or adaptation or mitigation projects, they actually sit on the table in the NDCs. So when we interact with them and give them feedback, carry out projects together, our voice somehow indirectly is actually taken into the official platforms. And then alliances and partnerships. So when we partner, for example, researchers, like I said, our first research in 2020 and the research that we've done in 2021 through SACAO, these kind of alliances actually help us to get the content that we need to submit at the NDC platform, because this is a policy issue. So we realize that you cannot do policy advocacy without the policy itself. And these are technical discussions happening at national level. They are looking into data-driven advocacy. Where are you getting the suggestions that you are making? Did you do a research? So researchers are very critical. And some of the researchers also then contribute into the policy as well at the expert level. So when we work with them, we also make sure that the voice is carried out. And that is how we are pursuing it through all these 4 entry points. I should mention that NDCs is not only the planning process that then comes into the NDC document that is sent to UNFCCC, but also implementation. When farmers' organizations are implementing the NDCs on the ground, from a policy perspective, we are actually engaging with the NDC process, and the feedback loops that are created on those projects in the implementation are actually then supposed to be carried out into the NDC development processes. So the critical factors to some of our success has been that we have managed to assess the gaps in NDC. We've managed to assess the cycle. At what point are they doing a biannual report? When are they submitting a renewal or a revised version? And then the use of science and evidence-based contributions, like I said, when we submitted our first, is one of the critical things. Then we come to partnerships, like I said, leveraging relationships with non-government partners to form joint positions at policy consultations. So I've already spoken into that. And then collaborating with government on grassroots implementation and providing feedback. So partnerships are very essential, because even when you are not there on the table, you also have your voice represented. But that does not take away our ambition to actually be on the table. And then relationships, relating with policymakers officially and casually behind the scenes, to set the scene at the official table. We realize that when we create, for example, events or forums like our National Congress that we do yearly, we invite the permanent secretaries, especially from agriculture. Even the minister himself comes. We have award ceremonies for our farmers. So in these platforms that are not necessarily for NDCs, we are able to air some of our thoughts, be it ad hoc, be it during networking. And we realize that these contributions we make unofficially actually have a bearing, because they change the conversation when these influential policymakers sit on their table. So we organize also multi-stakeholder dialogues between the Ministry of Agriculture and the farmers themselves. And we are also creating these dialogues between farmers and the Ministry of Environment. Now, into strengthening advocacy and integration, these are some of our deductions as to what we can do as farmer organizations to be able to partake or sit and influential at the seat, because it is one thing to be on the seat, and it is another thing to actually have the content that is going to be carried out into the NDCs, right? The first thing is designate climate change portfolio within farmer organizations to research, implement, and foster proactive engagement on UNFCCC processes. We need departments that are solely focused on climate change, because we bear the biggest brand of climate change as farmers. So we really need this that does the research and also creates or formulates projects to address adaptation issues and mitigation issues. That way we create room for us to be respected, because we are actually implementing what the policy, the existing policy says. Then number 2, we need to assess local policy development structures, cycles, and identify our entry points, like I just showed. Research is very important to this, because you cannot assume. You need to really interact with the policymakers, and they tell you this is how you can enter the processes. And then number 3, we need to analyze existing NDCs there are FAO toolkits that I've seen that we can make use of, so that when we contribute, it is really, a proper assessment that we have done on the gaps. Sometimes you go to those platforms and you end up speaking of things that have already been done. But when you use these toolkits, you are able to really know where concerns of farmers have not been addressed. And I'll touch on exact messages that we derive that we need to push as farmer organizations, depending, of course, on your context, right? We need to strengthen our farmer consultative processes within farmer organizations. For example, we have 300,000 farmers. How do we, reach out to all of them to get the input that we need? In Zimbabwe Farmers Union, for example, I can speak for the youth wing. We have what are called Learn and Shares, where we gather every month. And we have, last one, we had 151 farmers. We moved from province to province. So what we gather there are the exact inputs that we need to then use into our advocacy, because we need to represent the farmers' thoughts. It is not always easy to represent them in so many members. We do with other farmer organizations, foresters, and CSOs. I'll touch on foresters because sometimes we talk about farm organizations. In our African context, mostly farm organizations don't include foresters. But when we remove forestry out of agriculture, what happens is that our strength to say we are an important stakeholder is limited, because forestry has a huge capacity to reduce emissions in terms of mitigations. Most of the sectors within agriculture outside of forestry actually mostly depend on adaptation. So in terms of even mobilizing financing and sharing that we have 54% of emissions, therefore we're an important stakeholder. When we remove forestry, sometimes it doesn't work out. And then let's form consortiums with better equipped development partners, organize stakeholder dialogues and events to allow farmers to air out issues directly, because normally the ones who have the monies have a seat on the table, from what we have realized. And we cannot blame them for that, because also there's need for mobilizing financing to carry out the adaptation and mitigation projects. So when we work with these embassies, work with these development agencies, form a consortium on different projects, then in those forums, we're able to share directly the feedback, and it can be carried into the platforms that we need our voice to be heard. Participate in processes at local, county, and regional levels. So in devolved countries, their governance at different provinces, we can, participate at those levels in the climate change department, in the local processes that they'll be doing. Then generate clear and catchy messaging for advocacy and leverage various multimedia platforms. We need position papers that reach the audience that we intend, so that they know our positions. And in light of that, my last slide, I'll talk about the generic content to include. Number one is increasing agri-specific mitigation targets, quantifiable actions. So you realize that the renewal process of NDCs focuses firstly on increasing ambition. If we're saying we want to cut down the gases by 33%, we have to increase a bit. Like, for example, 33 was our first NDC. Now we are targeting 40%. So when we look into that, we have to feed into the bigger ambition as farm organizations. Look at what has been our target and say, now the increased target that we think as farmers we are able to bring to the table is this one. And number two, increase policies, and actions to build resilience and enhance adaptation. Now, what the second important thing about NDC renewal process is, we need to look at what has been said to be done. For example, they mentioned NDC. They mentioned in NDC that was submitted in 2021 that we need to include agriculture. So the thing that we do with the renewal process is to expand. How are we going to do the renewal process? Like I said, also as an example, we contribute towards the agroecology policy by saying this is how we are going to do it as farmers, and this is what works, this is what does not work. And then number three on what we need to carry as our message as farmers is describe the balance, and promote synergies between agri adaptation and mitigation. The most important thing that I found about agriculture, forestry, and land use, sectors is that it is the only sector that is involved in both sides of the balance sheet. By that, I mean, we are the only sector that can carry out adaptation and mitigation at the same time. For example, if you are a farmer, when you are doing, agroecology, for example, you are using manure in the soil. manure improves the the sequestration of carbon, which is reduction, which is mitigating climate related gases or emissions. But at the same time, you are doing adaptation because you are going to minimize the need for water in your projects. That is the nature of most of our projects in farming. I've just given an example. So we need to state that our agriculture, actually, when we are dealing with the AFOLU sector, we are going to deal with the adaptation at the same time deal with mitigation, and that is how important we are as a sector in the negotiation table. And then specific reference to importance of farmers and national farm organizations in achieving goals. We need to clearly state that we are a good implementing partner when it comes to that, because we command the biggest number of people who are affected by climate change, and also the biggest number of people who can actually be a solution to climate change. And then we need to also align NDCs with existing national development and sectoral plans and targets. And that is one thing that we really need to do. What is our national development strategy in Zimbabwe? National Development Strategy 1, we need to know we want to be an upper middle income economy. Now, when we tie what we want to do towards the NDCs or reduction of emissions or adaptation or mitigation to what the government wants to achieve, we become an important stakeholder on board, because we are solving the national problems. And then ensure stronger link SDGs. That is the same as the previous point, but this is now at a global level. Zero hunger, that's our goal from an agricultural perspective, but also we deal with poverty issues, because most of the people that are most people are employed within the agricultural sector in Africa in general. So when we are dealing with food issues, we're also indirectly dealing with poverty issues. And then also we're dealing with climate issues at the same time, and healthy issues come on board as well. Now, also, we need to include voices of marginalized groups, that is the women, the youth, and indigenous groups, because most of these people are hosted within our sector as well. And then we need to include sectoral budget allocation. We need to define what are the expenses to get the things we need done. And when we have that budget, we can really specify. And I saw that when we analyze NDCs, it is important, especially Africa normally does not highlight exactly what is the budgetary requirement for the processes that they have mentioned. This is important when we are mobilizing climate finance. And with that, I thank you. And I think I can await the questions and share more. Thank you.
Thank you, Willem. I know that you have invested a lot of time and resources. If you allow, I would now ask Maïdie to do her presentation, because she's really talking about tools available that you could use to give numbers of your weight in these processes, and then we'll have a question and answer sessions. And I understood Maïdie will do her presentation in French. So please, those ones, check from the lower bar that you have clicked the globe so that you have the interpretation in English available if you need it. So please, Maïdie, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Tina. Alors, je vais partager mon écran. Voici. Donc, si vous ne pouvez pas le voir, n'hésitez pas à prendre la parole pour me le signifier.
So I hope you can hear me.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, we can see it.
On peut commencer. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation.
Thank you for the invitation to speak today. My name is Maïdie Sinitambirivoutin. I am from FAO, and I'm going to present ABC Map, which is a mapping tool for adaptation, biodiversity, and carbon mapping. And I'll also mention other tools that are important that are also developed by FAO. Now, to start with the ABC Map, it is developed by FAO with the UN and the German Ministry of Agriculture and Food. What is it? It is an application, geospatial application that is free online on the link that you can see here at the bottom right of the slide, and allows the users to assess in a holistic manner the potential impact of their project in the agricultural sector. Why have we developed this tool? because as we know, the agricultural sector is facing certain issues that are linked to adaptation to climate change, the attenuation, and also the effect on biodiversity, which must be dealt with in synergy. And ABC map tries to respond to these needs of having synergy for the different actions. And so it responds to these needs by giving a holistic view to the impact on agriculture, and also respond to ensuring that we have an easy access to this data. And also, because it is free and it's available online, the results can be obtained in a few seconds. And also, the tool is based specifically on data that is accessible. And so the agriculture will just give very little information to be able to use ABC map. So we do not need to go to the ground so that you can use the tool. In a practical way, at what level would you use ABC map? It is a tool that is meant to support different teams at the conception and at the when you're dealing with the concept, so you can identify the zones that are of particular interest to you and come up with activities that are adapted to these areas, and also you assess the potential impact of your activities in the specific region. I will now show you by demonstration. It is easier. It's easier than just explaining. We'll go very quickly and with a demonstration with a lot of information. I will not give you everything, but just to know that our technicians are always available through email to show you demonstration how to use the tool. ABC map is at the address abc-map.org. When you go to the site, you can change the language, for example. So the tool is in English, in Spanish, in French, and Portuguese. So I'll change into French. And you can click on technical guide, or you can click on start. When you click on start, you have to define the region of your project. So here we're going to see demonstration. And I'll take the example of a real project that took place in Côte d'Ivoire, where they were carrying out reforestation activities and improvement of agriculture in cocoa production. So it is a real project, and we had to adapt the activities, the date, and the region for the demonstration, our demonstration. So I give the name of my project. So I give the resolution of the card to this level. So here I have maps at the resolution of 300 meters. Now I have to dimension now the area, define the area of the project. So I have to use upload this document, like you can see it here. And the zone of my project appears here. You can see it here in pink on my card. So then after that, I am going to click on situation to reference, and I wait for it now to give us the information, and I'll tell you how it works as we wait. So ABC map is divided into 3 sections: adaptation, of diversity, and carbon, and each one of them has indicators on the topics of these 3 topics. So ABC map, you're going to have indicators in form of a graph, and also you have maps. So to access to maps, you click on this, and you have the list of all the maps that are available. And with the keys, there's also at the top here, you can also change the language, or you can also have access to help, where you get all the answers to all your questions, and also the contacts. You can get in touch with our team. So here I go very quickly on the indicators that we have available here. In the adaptation section, we have information on the area of region, and you have score of climatic risk for this area is a score of 0.6. So that is a moderate risk. That in the thematic process, you have information on the how the temperatures have been moving annually, the precipitation, and extreme climatic events, and the number of days of strong rains the days without rains, when it was snowing, and the days of hot days. Have all this information in a temporal series, and this information is there from 1980 up to 2022. After that, you have, sorry, I see something that didn't work. Sometimes it happens. You have information on the altitude for the region. You have the presence of surface water, but you also have the percentage that shows you whether you are in a flat area or in a mountainous region. So in the section of diversity, we have indicators about the use of land. So you can see here a temporal representation from 1992 up to 2020, the use of land. And we have also put 2021, 2022, add those in next month. You also have a map correspond to this. You can show it here. You can see the cut of the use of land. There's a forest here, and there's a mixture here of this agriculture and this forestry. We also have from the section of diversity, you can see the different species that are here. This is an indicator for health of the ecosystem health. We also have the natural capital, which gives us in monetary terms different ecosystem services that comes from the specific region. We also have the geographical area, which
and so you can also see them on the map, like what you can see. And here in green, these are areas that are protected. What is in blue, that is for biodiversity. And with this, see, you could actually reduce so that you can see it differently. And so this shows also the using on biodiversity and also what has been protected. And finally, the last section is the carbon section. We have an indicator which is on data, and that is on vegetation, and also the social value of carbon, which is a monetary value, which gives an indication of the emissions to the atmosphere. And so these two indicators are calculated given methodologies and are based on the other that is done by PAFO, which is called NEXT. And so this is just a situation for a reference. And so we have activity at the beginning and at the end of the project. And so this shows what are the objectives of each activity. And here we have, you could actually add a certain number of hectares, and so you put it there. And so we have activity which is in blue on the map. And so what I'm doing is actually to improve practices in planting cocoa. And so I have selected the use of land which corresponds to this activity. And so this is a perennial crop. And so there is no labor. And so you can actually put a lot on carbon. And so here we give, for example, the residues and all that. And so that is the first activity. And so the second one is reforestation of the area. And so I have selected as the final use of land as forest, and also type of forest and normal forest. It is down here. And the last activity And I do exactly the same thing for this particular area. And so the objective at the end of it is to have a forest. And so once I finish all the activities, you can actually calculate for each indicator. And so this time we take into account the impact of these 3 activities of the project. And so this will take a few seconds because I had already downloaded it in the next page. And so what you can see here, there is use of land. It's actually easy. Yeah, it has been long since I changed, so it's a bit difficult. And so you can actually see the same graphical representations, but we have additional which shows the impact of the activities of the project. And so this is the improvement of the biodiversity health. And so we consider that the project is implemented this way. And so you can actually see the impact. My reference line is actually flat, so that it can be a reference point so that you can compare with the impact of the project. And so what is in red is actually continuous. And so here it is also flat and it is also continuous, just as the reference line. And you can see here for biodiversity, we had, there was an increase of the forest cover, and it is the same for the protected areas. There is what we did for the project, and so we also have a slight change in the natural capital, and so we could actually do the carbon stock. And so in adaptation, you show for the expected growth that this actually requires experts, and this gives a scenario for emissions, and the other one so for a near future, and so you could actually do for the middle term. And so this you do with the reference situation of these risks. And so this is important so that you can have information on emissions. And so that is the quick demonstration of ABC map. And so we need to come back to the important points. And so this is a tool that is for projects under AFOLU, which can be done locally, regionally, and nationally. And so these are small scale areas which are not taken into account. So you need to also specify different activities, and this can actually start after the reference. And so one other thing that is important is the management of the reserves, and so this is being developed in the near future. And so for the details, especially for the use of land, it is available in the definition of the project. And so we also have and so we have big categories, that is forests, annual crops, where you can talk about the level of labor, and also there is also that which is degraded, natural, or improved, and also the urban areas and urban parks and others. And so to finish, this is a tool that is being developed with new functionalities, with indicators in, and so we have the possibility of downloading a PDF report and also new options to put activities in the map. As an indicator, we have adaptation of crops and animals to climate. We also have indicators from the red list of IUCN. We are also going to develop a carbon section and also integrating next. And so we are going we do publication, and we also have trainings that are available and where you can actually request for training from us. And so the final part, we have other tools that have been developed by FAO, which are important. We have Next. This is based on Excel and which helps you to do calculations. We have the tracking tool, and we also have XMAP, which are tools to visualize the geospatial data. We have the climate risk toolbox, which is a tool and so you could actually do detailed analysis of climate risks. And finally, we have Ground. It is a mobile application which allows us to go to the field and also do georeferencing of projects. And we also have a questionnaire. And so if there are people who are on the ground, they can actually indicate directly the state of the land, what are the crops planted and all that. And so this data can be collected and so that they can be analyzed. And so, I'm going to put the links in chat. And so these are available, and I'm also available for questions. Thank you very much.
There was a lot of information and many acronyms. So this was a very rapid view on what kind of tools they are available. But maybe if I could ask immediately, like if you take William's situation in Zimbabwe, and if the Zimbabwean Farmers Union would like to understand how could they use the ABC map if, for example, they want to introduce agroecological practices to their members? Is that feasible?
So I will answer in English maybe. So ABC map will be helpful to understand agroecology because you can visualize where you have annual cropland, visualize what are the climate risks that those cultures can face, visualize what is the state of biodiversity around it, so it can be used first to raise awareness on the challenges that those cultures face and the impacts of those cultures on the environment. And then on the project side, so the level of granularity that you will have will be only to specify the level of tillage and the level of carbon inputs. So maybe it's not very disaggregated, but it still can give you a first estimate of the impact you could have on carbon stocks by reducing the level of tillage and introducing a better management of crop residues, introducing intercropping, for example, or better managing the links between places where you have livestock and where you have manure available, and if you can displace it on your fields to make carbon amendments. So all these practices are taken into account into the carbon inputs. So it can give you first estimates of what changing those practices would have on the integrity of ecosystems, on the ecosystem services they can provide, and on the carbon stocks that you can store on your cropland.
Okay, thank you. So there is a kind of a lot of interesting features in this tool available. I know that there is already a question by TP, which asks like how to ask for your assistance to strengthen the capacity of farm organization if somebody is interested.
So for ABC Map, our team is available at the email abc-map@fao.org. We are always available for any questions you may have, or if you would like to request a capacity building to use the tool. And we can link you with colleagues at FAO that develop other tools, geospatial tools such as EarthMap or CPAL, THD accounting tools like Next, or a tool like Ground for data collection on fields. So feel free to reach out to the ABC Map team, and we'll be happy to link you with colleagues if necessary, or answer all your questions.
Good, thank you. I open now the floor for any questions. We have Derrick and William still on board, and Maïdie, of course. So if you want to share your views, your comments, or ask questions, please, the floor is yours.
Hello,
Hello?
good morning. I have a question for Maïdie. Maybe I will go in French.
Okay.
Oui, bonjour Maïdie. Merci pour ta
So good afternoon, Maïdie, and thank you for the presentation that has been very interesting. I would like to ask for ABC, the tool ABC Map, can we use it at a scientific level? Because I would like to do studies concerning the evaluation of the impact on the use of ETC and also carbon in a near future. So I would like to ask, I could use it for a scientific study. And if, are you going to publish the data after that? Because that would not be a problem. Because I'm from Benin and I would like to see the impact, especially of cotton in Benin, and the terms of carbon and links to climate change. Thank you very much. Thank you for this question. So I think that in case of a scientific study, it's in terms of indicators. And so in our technical guide, you could have more information on how we calculate indicators and based on what scientific basis that we are going to give our results. And so as we based on databases on the two, which are reviewed by peers and also published in peer-reviewed journals. And so the methodology is on factors of carbon stocking. And so these are linked to what is not clear, but we do estimations where we do not have data. And so we have tier 1 methodologies. And so the tool has not been reviewed by the peers, but it is a methodology that could be used. And so for carbon stocking, for example, for future estimations, I could also, we have GStock. These are maps that are available internationally and give projections on future carbon stocks, which could be used. And so if you have a sustainable management scenario, maybe low, medium, and high, you could refer to the current stocks, and so you could actually put 5% increase. And so this shows what can be achieved. And so I'm going to give you the link on chat so that you can get this information that is important.
Maybe I could ask two questions.
Merci,
William and Derrick. You have demonstrated how hard you have been working through the different stakeholders to have a voice in the NDC process and in general to be included in the committee. What is your feeling? Does the Ministry for Agriculture has the sufficient understanding and technical capacity to deal with this process? And what is your first recommendations to work through and with the agricultural ministries to get the better position for farm organizations?
Tina, sorry, I didn't get the first part. Were you referring to me in this question?
I was asking you and Derrick, since you are now you are there on the microphone. So how do you feel that the Ministry of Agriculture is dealing with this question?
Okay, thank you. I mean, dealing with the Minister of Agriculture is a good thing, of course, in that we have established relationships from before. However, you are never truly sure what influence also they have and other things they have in mind, because we are not only the stakeholder they listen to. So whenever it comes to the actual sharing of our recommendations, I think definitely there are some that they don't share, and there are some that they cannot support as much as we can, because they are handling a lot on their table. In terms of capacity to understand exactly, our ministry, including even the Ministry of Environment itself, I believe they do not have sufficient staff in terms of numbers, sufficient staff in terms of technical capacity to deal with this, which is often the case in any developing country. So, I feel more can be done for them to really have a good appreciation of the issues at hand. And also issues of climate change, I feel they are not as, respected as they are in other parts of the world in developing countries. And most of the times it's because we always say, climate change only contribute 4% of the global emissions as Africa. So, most of these issues, they are not supposed to be what we're supposed to be dealing with, especially on mitigation, because we do not emit as much. So I feel that is the feeling I have when I'm interacting with the officials, policymakers, especially the Ministry of Agriculture level. Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if Derrick wants to reflect on this.
Yeah. I think on our part, I would say that for the Ministry of Agriculture, I think to us it's a different story, because we have a very good working relationship with the Ministry of Agriculture, and almost each and every technical committee, steering committee, we have a seat. And when the ministry is producing any other document, we are invited. Just last week, we are developing an agricultural development strategy. We are in the task force committees, and we are a key stakeholder to the Ministry of Agriculture. So what we have noted is that I think even the Ministry of Agriculture itself, I think, has a limited space in the NDC processes. So because the ministry itself has a limited space, it also struggles to provide that space to its stakeholders as farm organizations. So because I think, as I said, it's just one focal person at a technical level who sits in the National Technical Committee, not even at the steering committee. So I think that's what is making us to really be left out as farmers in Malawi. But suffice to say, I wanted to say that it's not that we are doing nothing as farm organization in Malawi. Almost our project programmings align with the issues of climate change and NDC. We always make sure that we respond and align to the NDC. And with the Ministry of Agriculture itself, we even develop programs together, projects together that are speaking to the NDC. But the only disconnect that is there is on our participation in the coordination processes. And I would also like to agree with William to say, one, I think the Department of Environmental Affairs, I think, seems to really have no capacity. And again, I feel like it also doesn't have that understanding on how the issues of climate change are connected to agriculture. I think what I'm seeing from my perspective is not that they do not value the climate change as a country for Malawi, but I think we have associated issues of climate change to relief issues like that. So you find that when it comes to relief, it's now the Department of Disaster Management Affairs that looks at that, and usually the Minister of Agriculture and farmers are always left. It's about buying food aid and distributing, and that you find that the space is different when it comes to the stakeholders now. But I think the moment the Department of Environmental Affairs start realizing the law that farm organizations or the law of agriculture in the UNFCCC definitely will be incorporated in the at least the technical committees of mitigation adaptation. I think will be okay, because these are just technical committees. So if we are invited in under the mitigation adaptation, we feel like as farmers will be able to have a first hand in presenting our issues in that platform. So yeah, just as a short for the meetup, if the Minister of Agriculture has more space, we'll be assured of the same space. But I think even the ministry is struggling to have that space. Thank you.
Thanks, Derrick. I understood when I visited FAO last time that they invite, for example, the national climate negotiators from developing countries to be trained, and they discuss the role of AFOLO, but I think that it feels that there are several levels where the kind of further information is needed. Not only the national negotiators, but also the national participants representing the ministries for agriculture, livestock, etc. in these processes, that they could also need to be here. I wonder if there are any other questions.
I think I have a question, Tina, to say.
Yes, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I really don't know. I think as farm organizations, maybe we can brainstorm on how we can effectively really participate in these coordinating structures. William presented a little bit more encouraging story on how they are getting closer to the coordination. Notice they have been given a seat. They're just waiting for them to consolidate and have one representative, which is a good direction. But I think one thing that I'm noting is that even for them, they're even struggling to penetrate the structure. So I don't know, maybe just be like a brainstorming or food for thought for farmer to say, how can we really collectively lobby for the participation? Because I think, to me, I feel like it is how the UNFCCC has been framed, I think, from the top, that I think as farm organizations are not really given that space. I compared it to the UNF food systems, for example, the dialogues that press. The dialogues were very inclusive. You could find that civil society organizations, farmers, everybody really participated. And when we are doing the national dialogues, it was a very participatory and inclusive process, and that cascaded into the actual summit, where everybody felt like was part and parcel of that process. But I think I don't know how we can bring this, because to me, I feel like there's a proverb, a local proverb that says, when you want to kill a snake, you have to kill the head itself. I feel like if we can take this to the actual UNFCCC to say, as farmers, we feel like we are being left out, and then the directive trickles down to the member states, I feel like maybe that would be easier. But if we are fighting as individuals in our respective countries, I think we'll be having that kind of the successes that are different, others will still be struggling. But I think if the UNFCCC commands our country to say, okay, where is the farmer voice in your report? Where is farmer participation in your coordination structure? I feel like little by little be able to be incorporated in the coordination structure. So I just feel like the reflection as farm organizations, how can we really collectively bring this issue to the UNFCCC and make sure that the road starts from the top and gets down. Thank you.
Thank you, Derrick. Yes, good reflection on how we could strengthen the advocacy. I wonder if there are any other questions, remarks? If not, what I would like to propose is that you go to respond. Oh, bonjour. Il y a quelqu'un qui veut.
Ici, c'est bien.